The following talk by Diane O'Connell was given at the Spirit Release Forum Conference in July 2014. The talk is entitled Opening the Door to Healing, the Role of the Healer in the Therapeutic Process.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here, and it's lovely to have this joint conference between Dave's organisation and mine. I want to talk this afternoon from the healer perspective. I've been involved in training healers for many, many years now, and I'm also very involved at a national level to create incredibly good standards for healers in this country, and it is my passion. And I was very struck by the idea about light workers today, and I was thinking that actually as healers we are at one level light workers because we work with spirit and energy, and we are also working at every level within the individual. We don't actually work just physically, we don't just work spiritually or with past life. We work, if you like, within that spectrum. And because of that, we need to really understand what we're doing and where we're coming from, and know the difference between our energy and someone else's. So what I'd like to just sort of set a scene really before I go into sort of how we work is to talk about the landscape that I as a healer, and also I can only talk from my own perspective, my own understanding and my own experience. That's all any of us can speak from. But what we can do is we can offer concepts and ideas and experience that hopefully will inspire you to go forward, to develop yourselves. First of all, as a healer, I see everything as energy. I see everything vibrating at different levels of frequency. So although I may be standing here in front of you and I look very physical, we all know that actually that isn't true, that actually there's a lot of space in my energy field. And that energy is on all levels. So I have a physical energy, an emotional energy, a mental energy, and indeed a spiritual energy. And in the healing world, we call that the energetic matrix. So the matrix is made up of our aura, which has been talked about today by Helen Ford, and chakras, which hasn't been mentioned today. So the concept is that we have energy vibrating at different levels, giving us a different energetic system. And we're all unique. We're all individual spirits that have incarnated and come to this fantastic planet to experience and to grow and to learn and to develop, whatever that is for us. We talked about, deciding this is the life we've chosen. And why have we chosen that? What is that about? For me, it's all about experiences, neither good nor bad, it just is. And it's about what that's teaching us about ourselves and each other. And indeed, I feel that if we are all God experiencing, we are growing God by our experience, if you can see it from that point of view. So we have this energetic matrix, which is our chakras and our energy field. And the higher self, that David talked about so eloquently this morning, oversees and, if you like, give guidance to that whole system. And if we came into incarnation and we were in harmony and balance, and the environment in which we came into was in harmony and balance, that energy that flows from the higher self down through all the system that creates who we are would be in harmony and balance, and life would be great. We would have the lovely life that was talked about by Helen, really joyful and loving and wonderful. However, we all know that life just isn't like that. It's full of all sorts of things. And so our energy field and our experience gets informed two ways. One, from the spirit down, and two, from the environment in and up. So we get informed in our energy system, which holds all our memories, all our experiences, all our knowledge is all held with our energetic system. And what we take in and what we bring through all informs it. So your past is part of your present, and your present is part of your past. So we just are operating in the now, hopefully, and not in the past or the future. So for me, your inner world is about that energy experience of who you are, holds all your knowledge about something. And if we look inside, we are actually reading our energy system. And each of us will read it differently. So some of us will read it through our thoughts and our feelings, and others will read it through our intuition and our symbols maybe, or metaphor, or whatever it happens to be. But all of us read our inner worlds differently. We experience them uniquely and differently. And so from my point of view, when I work with clients, I believe that everyone is uniquely different. And just like you said earlier, I have no idea what people are coming to share with me, what I need to do. And I agree with you totally. I have to listen. I have to listen on all levels to what the person brings. Because my belief is that the higher self within the person is looking for healing. It's looking for wholeness. And it's trying to find where it can find that. And some people arrive at my door hoping that I'm the answer, or the person, the catalyst that can make things change within their lives. And other people will arrive at other people's doors because at some level that higher self thinks this is the right place for me to be able to grow, to learn, to change, to alter, to develop. Now the thing is, as healers we get different sorts of clients, and indeed we've had people talking, and as I listened I was thinking, but that's a certain type of client. You know, these people come with certain issues, but as healers, you know, we get everybody coming. We don't necessarily specialise. Our energy might be specialist, but in principle we can get people coming, and certainly I have them coming to me who have life-threatening illnesses, who are really sick. People who had really bad accidents and are recovering. You get people who come because they've got some existential crisis going on, or there's a bereavement, or indeed they've just broken their leg and they just want to come along and have some healing. So people come for all sorts of reasons and in all sorts of ways. And my skill and the skill of other healers is about how we can help that person find that balance and harmony within themselves. Now for me, there's something about the energy of what happens to our energy. If you think about what I said earlier about the fact that the energy comes down from our higher self, in fact, the way I see it when we come into incarnation is that the spirit that says this is the life comes into incarnation, comes into the life gets sparked by the energy of the father and the mother, and the spirit of the person ignites that life, and we then start to grow ourselves within the womb. And the energy, there's threefold. It's the father, the mother, and the spirit of the incoming person, who's us. We were the incoming souls. We use the energy of our parents to incarnate and come into the life. And that energy of the parents informs that life. We carry that in our DNA. And so that energy is within us. And in our early years is very strong because the spirit of us has not been able to inform the life enough. The energy of the parents is stronger than the incarnating soul. So, you know, in our internal worlds, our parents' energy is quite strong because it is strong. It needs to be strong. And indeed, as we get older, we then all end up in therapy trying to sort out all the issues around our parents. As my daughter said earlier, that's what she's been doing. And also, she, as I said to her, we gave her the tools to be able to go and do that. But you know, that's what our children have to do. And even though we thought we'd got it right, you know, there's no sort of right. Because children are down here and we're up here and we see the world completely differently. So people can come to you as a client and they don't necessarily need to have been had serious trauma in their lives. But they do come. So what I was going to say was, as this energy comes in and out, kinks occur because things happen. You know, the energy gets disturbed, it comes out of balance. And when that occurs, particularly if you're little, and I'm not talking about major trauma here, I'm just talking about general life, you know, because the people that come to my room are people who have been quite traumatised. But all of us have the kinks, and all of us, you know that those things happen, and it affects our energy and how it flows. And it also interrupts the link between the higher self and how it can really speak to us in a daily way to help us make decisions, to inform us on how to live our lives. So that gets interrupted because of the kinks that have occurred throughout our life. And part of the job is trying to undo those kinks. And they needn't be necessarily major traumas, but because the kink's there and the energy's got out of balance, it just gets out of balance and out of balance. And what occurs then is it feels huge when in fact it needn't necessarily be that big at all. So those traumas, as we heard earlier, can actually be kinks in the energy system that can really affect us as our life goes on. And some of them are more traumatic than others. And I was thinking about an example of that, and I was thinking about my own life. And when I was younger, when my husband then used to go off and do things, there was no such thing as mobile phones then, I'm going back a long way. And he'd say he'd be home at 6 and 6:10 come and he hadn't turned up. My imagination had him under a bus and I'd get all anxious. And he'd walk in and I'd say to him, "Where on earth have you been?" You know, and he'd say, "Well, I was only doing this, that and the other." And I suddenly realised that every time that happened, I'd get myself in a right one to an 8. And we agreed that if he was going to be late, he'd ring me up and say, "Diane, I'm going to be late." And I'd go, "Right, okay, how long are you going to be?" So he'd say much longer than he thought he was going to be, so that he could be home well to time. So, and I just got to a point and suddenly thought, hang on a minute here. You know, this is crazy for me to be doing this every time, and it caused all sorts of issues. So I thought, I've got to sort this. So at that time, I didn't have a therapist, and I didn't even know about going to therapy. So I decided to do a lot of inner work. And it was like these kinks, you know. It was like I'd go in and I'd find a layer, and I'd do a bit of healing work on the layer, and below me, I was still behaving like I was. I'd go in and do a bit more. It took a while, until eventually I came to a time when I was 6 years old, and my grandfather died. And he was a very important person in my life because my father was still in the army and he was the man at home. And as soon as I brought back to the surface and was able to express the grief that I hadn't been able to express at 6 years old, the fact that my husband came home late was completely irrelevant. I didn't care anymore, because what had got stuck was the energy of the grief. It wasn't the fact that my grandfather had died, because death is normal, it's where we're all heading. What happened was the fact that I hadn't been able to resolve that energy of grief, and it was stuck in my system somewhere. And I needed to grieve the loss, and as soon as I did that, my behaviour changed like magic. And that was the first time I learned that if you change your internal world, your external world changes. That was the first time. And that was back in 1982, I think. So, you know, that was a huge revelation. And I suddenly realised that if we start to shift and change what's going on inside, you know, our external world changes by magic. So the other thing I want to say before I go on is to say that people's energy systems, which is the chakras and the aura, are all uniquely different. And if you have, some people have really robust systems, and it's because the type of energy they've got, the type of spirit they've got, brings that quality of robustness to the system, but also they've been brought up in a way that's been very supportive, very caring, And that has given them what you were talking about earlier, Helen. They're able to stand in their space and say who they are and feel very confident and happy about that. And if people have that, and children also, if they have that sort of environment, if they do then have a problem or difficulty, it doesn't stick for people who do not have robust systems. The healing comes from the care and the support and the love that happens, and it enables to bring that energy system back into balance. But if you don't have that support in your environment, then what happens is those problems and difficulties in the system make it weaker, make you less resilient to problems and difficulties. So I just want to set that as a scene. So when it comes to healing and working with the higher self to help change the inner world of another, healers work in two ways. They work energetically with the client, and we call that self-healing. So we engage the client. Before I go on, can someone tell me when I'm supposed to finish?
It should be 40 past.
Okay.
We can go on in 5 minutes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I just need to keep an eye on it. I can ramble on, as you've probably gathered. Once you know, my husband says if you wind me up, you just set me off, I just keep going. So, anyway, where was I? Okay, so we work in two ways. And certainly when I train our students, these are the two ways we teach them to work. One is you engage the client, and we call that self-healing. Two, you do the healing for the client. Now the thing is that I have had clients over the years, and I trained as a psychotherapist. I've run a practice for over 30 years. I've seen a lot of clients in my time, some incredibly ill and very damaged, if we can use that word. And I know from my experience that some of the clients I have seen could never do the work that Dave was talking about this morning. It's impossible. You know, they are unable to do that sort of work. Other clients are too ill to do that sort of work. You know, they're too poorly, they couldn't do it. But you get another set of clients who can actually really happy to be involved and part of the process. And as the healer, you work in two different ways. You work either energetically, teaching the client energetic skills that enable them to look after their own energetic system, which then will put their own inner world back to rights, or you get them to work similarly to the way that others have been talking in their inner world. So you help them go inward and start to see what the issues are, what the knots are that have been caused inside, and how you can help them untangle that. So I did write some notes, so I think I better have a quick look, see what I decided to talk about. Okay. So if we look at the energetic issues first. So from a healing perspective, and in a sense, what you've got is within the system, you've got these knots that have been occurred or other issues energetically. And you can use different skill sets to be able to shift the energy. So one of the practices is a thing called cutting the ties that bind that Phyllis Crystal brought over to England in the early 80s. Has any of you done that? Yeah, okay. It's a really powerful exercise to do. The idea is that we create energetic links with other people. It can be with your children, it can be with your partners, it can be with your parents. And these energetic links, they are like energy that goes from you to the other person, and they're just there. And that can cause all sorts of problems. Some of them are positive links, and some of them are negative links. And you could say, from a therapeutic point of view, you're talking about projection, transference, and countertransference. So you've got those energies that are running between the two. and that is not useful to either party, particularly if they're having real problems. So, for example, if we think about children, we don't have many rituals for children to become adults in their own right, and children are very strongly linked to their parents, particularly their mothers, because we've birthed them. Then those links quite often need to be cut. So the Phyllis Crystal energetic ritual that she created, which was to create a figure of 8 between you and the other and to cut any links between you, is incredibly powerful and actually releases both parties. I don't know whether her book is still in print, but it's called Cutting the Ties That Bind, and I use that exercise with many clients, particularly if they've got relationship issues or if they've got children who are still at home and need to move on and they're not doing that. You know, it can come handy in all sorts of ways. So mums who've still got 25 and 30-year-olds at home, it's a good idea to cut the links. So that's one energetic exercise that we'll do. Another one is what I call the sieving technique. We pick up energy from each other all the time. And it's in our energy system. So you're not only got your own energy in here, you could have all sorts of people's energy in your system. You know, we open ourselves out to others. We are very vulnerable at times to situations. And so we can be a bit like, you know, dusty old rooms that have never been dusted or polished, and we can be full of, you know, dust and crap that we've picked up over the time. Or we can be full of energy that belongs to someone else. And when David was talking about, you know, the empty room that's got, you know, all sorts of people in it, well, I don't see it in quite that way. I don't see it quite so factual in that way. I see it in a much more nebulous way. I see it as energy that gets stuck in the system that belongs to someone else, and it's creating havoc in your system. And just as an example of that, I had a student quite a few years ago, and she said to me, she was in a group I was running, she said to me, I have got my mother coming, she said. She lives a long way away. I am sick and tired. I've been in therapy for years. I have talked about her. I have done everything I can think of about her. And yet every time she comes, the first thing we do, within half a day, we are rowing. And she said, she's coming for a week. I'm never going to survive. So I said to her, I reckon you've got your mum's energy stuck in your system. I said, you can't process it. The only way you can do is let it go, you know, give it back. And she said, well, how do I do that? So I said, well, it's really easy. You just work out where your mother's energy is and you just send it off. And I said to her, I'm going to give you a technique. And I thought you might like to do this technique. Would you be interested in seeing whether you've got a load of stuff in your aura that you'd like to get rid of? Yeah? I said, good. It's a really easy thing to do, but it can be really, really powerful. And it's all done under the auspices of the higher self. And the thing about this woman was that her inner world was really disturbed by this mother energy. And this is what I told her to do. So I want you to listen and hear what it is, and then we'll do it, okay? So you relax, center and ground, and make sure you're in your bodies. And then I asked her to tune into her higher self and ask her higher self whether she had any of her mother's energy in her system. And if she did, for the higher self to show her where it was and give it a colour. And she went, oh, that's funny, she said. Yeah, I can see that. So I said, right, now the next stage is very simple. You then ask your higher self for a coloured sieve, very fine sieve. And imagine it's above your head, and it's the right colour to sieve out the colour that's in the system. And you bring the sieve down, and as you bring it down, you pick up all that energy that belongs to whatever it is, her mother in this case, and you take it down and you send it into the earth for recycling. I said you do it 3 times and then don't do it anymore. And then I said tomorrow you do it again. After a month, I'm sure that there won't be much energy left. Now what happens is that the energy that's in the system, you can only get, you know, you're letting go of a little bit at a time. And as it goes, what's more deep in the unconscious comes to the surface. So you have to keep doing the process. Sometimes the colour changes, and if it does, you get a different coloured sieve. But you sieve the whole energy out. Now she did this for a month, and she said that her mother came to stay for a whole week, and they didn't argue once. And she said, I cannot believe it worked. Now, let's see what happens. I am the mother, okay? And the daughter's over here, and she's got my energy inside her, which is quite normal. It's very difficult to defend against your mum. It's really hard, as my daughter can tell you. And so what happens is, when her energy starts to vibrate, my energy starts to vibrate, this energy in her will start to vibrate, because it's the same energy. And as that starts to vibrate, it disturbs the energy of the person who has it within them. And when that happens, they get out of balance, and you know, right, okay, so would you like to do that? Okay, so I don't want you to think about mothers, you can go away and do that, therapist, whoever. What I just want you to think about is there any energy in my energy system that shouldn't be there? So we're going to make it broad, okay? So, you know, you're one of my clients. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to just deepen the breathing and just relax out. And just relax the best you're able. And just follow what you're able to do. And if you can't, it's fine. Don't worry. So as you relax, I just want you to feel your feet on the floor. I want you to think about the fact that you've got this aura around you, this energy system which holds all your memories, all your experience. And then in your own way, I want you to tune into your higher self in whatever way you do that. That part of you that overlights the life. And I want you to ask that higher self if there's any energy in your system that doesn't belong to you. And if so, to draw your attention to it and to give it a colour. And when you've been aware of that, I want you to then ask your higher self to give you a sieve, a very fine sieve of the right colour to sieve out this energy. And then when you're ready, I want you in your imagination to draw this sieve down through the whole of your energy system. Imagine it going down into the earth, taking the energy with it, and just let it go. Then I want you to do it again. I want you, when you've done it, first first time, I want you to do it the second time. Just bring the sieve down again, picking up any other energy that's in the system. Taking it all the way through, all the way down, deep into the earth, and letting it go. And now we're going to do it for a third time. When you're ready, again, bring the sieve above the head, down through the system. Picking up all that energy you don't need anymore. Letting it go deep into the earth for recycling. And let it go. And then when you've done that, I want you to ask your higher self to release the spiritual colour that is yours, uniquely yours. So just release that energy into the system so you fill the space that's been left with your own unique colour and note. And just know that this is your colour. This is your note. This is the energy that's right for you. And then when you're ready, just relax the thought. Become aware that you're sitting on the chairs with your feet on the floor. And just gently bring yourself back to waking consciousness. Everyone feel okay? Yeah? All back?
Yeah.
Good? All clean? Okay. Well, you can just, share amongst yourself another time about how that felt, because I suddenly realised that I hadn't got much time. Okay, so we would work energetically with the person. It's about helping them clear their energy, make it balanced, and we can do that by grounding. If people are not in their bodies, we need to get them grounded. By being grounded, it brings a lot of material to the surface. But again, we could work with visualization, similar to the way that David was talked earlier. But in my experience, what happens is that if people have got past life trauma, in my experience, it comes up quite naturally. It just comes out of the therapy, and you become aware that the person has got something from the past that's actually imposing on the present. And I would work with that just as it came, really. You'll never know when you're working in the internal world and people are bringing images and people to the surface. In my mind, they're not fact. It's the way they read what that is. It's symbolic, it's metaphorical. I think, personally for me, to think it's factual splits what's happening because you are a whole person. To split off, I know we use the language of separation, but we do need to recognise that it's all one, and that we are a whole being. The other thing that I want to talk about, which is quite different from what the others were saying, was actually when you work with people who cannot do their own healing, people who are too ill, or indeed can't go internal. And I've had some very sick people who I've seen who the idea of shutting their eyes and looking inwards is far too frightening. They couldn't do it. So the way a healer would work, and always everything you do, or everything I do, everything my students do, because that's how they've been taught, is always under the higher self. The higher self overrides all the work we do. You actually tune into your higher self, and you also, from the higher self, tune into the higher self of the other. And by tuning into the higher self of the client, you can actually then start to get insight and understanding in what that higher self needs for that client. So, for example, if I was working on someone who was too ill to actually do anything for themselves, or indeed they didn't want to or couldn't, then when I was tuning into them at an emotional or mental or spiritual level, I would ask their higher self to show me, maybe through symbolism or images, what healing work I need to do through the visualization that would actually help to shift and change the person's inner world. Now, whenever it's to do with the emotions, I always use water as a metaphor. So I always think, well, what's this person's water like? And as soon as I do that, I get a real sense of what that is. And for one client, I asked the image for their water, and when I looked at it, in my internal world, it was full of rubbish. So, it had all sorts of things floating on the surface, wood and old tin cans and all sorts of things. But what that meant was that at an emotional level, there was all sorts of things going on at an emotional level. And from a healing perspective, using the healing energy, I was able to clear all that out of that energetic field and just clear it all and bring some sort of stability to it. And then I would talk to the client afterwards, and depending on who they were, would be depending on whether I'd actually talk about what I was aware of. And I did tell this client what I saw, and they took that image away and they worked on it themselves. And the thing is that, and I did say to them, that's my image, that's not your image. So, and they said, no, that absolutely describes how I feel about myself. And they went away, and just working on that image created massive transformation. And at other times, the water, I can see storms gathering, and the water's doing this. And so what that tells me is the storm is something about the external world that's actually affecting their water. And I might then take that back and say to them, do you think there is an external situation that's actually affecting you? And using the healing energy, I would actually work on that image. And that's the way that healers tend to work. If they can't engage the client, you work on the images that you get because the higher self has impressed you that this is the image you need to work. It isn't true in the sense that that isn't true. It's symbolic of something. But you can bypass the conscious mind by working with the symbols and the images. And indeed, when we ask the clients to think about their own images, again, it can bypass their trauma sometimes, so that they're not dealing with a literal happening, but something that represents that can actually shift and change the energy inside. I could stand here all day and talk about this sort of stuff and bring all sorts of cases and things I've worked in over the years, but we don't have that time. But there is one thing I just want to draw to your attention just before we finish. But what's been happening to me just recently with clients, which is something that I've been looking at quite newly, is about the archetype that informs the life. Now, Dave talked about sub-personalities, but you can move into archetypal energies, and the archetypal energies could be something that we all have. So, and different stages of the life would say that you will be in a different type of archetype. So, for instance, we could say that if you've got children and you're doing a lot of mothering with young children, you're in the mother archetype. You could say at my time of life, you're in hopefully the old crone or the wise woman archetype. You can be in the warrior archetype, or you can be in the the wounded healer archetype. So those archetypes, those energies really inform the life, and they have quite an impact if you're aligning themselves with that archetype. So all of us in this room have had children. You know that when you're in that mother archetype, you know that mother energy informs the life in a very particular way and invokes energies out of you which are very appropriate to being a carer and a nurturer. But when you get to a certain age or time in your life, you have to let that go and move into a different archetype. And actually, that's quite a difficult process, because you have to let go of one set of energies that are informing the life and take on another set of energies that are informing the life. And if you enjoy being a mother, then you're not going to let that archetype go very easily. You're going to want to stay there. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and I did say to her, you know, you've got to let this go and move into your wise woman, because it's causing all sorts of problems, staying in the old energy. And I was working with a client this week, and I was saying to her, you know, you're still in the wounded healer archetype. You know, you keep thinking how wounded you are, how awful it is, and that archetype is keeping you stuck. You need to move out of that. And we were looking at how she could let that archetype go and move into something else. And I think that's a really interesting concept about the different stages of life, the different energies that should be appropriate to different stages of life, and how we let go of one and we move into another. And if we don't, how that really can cause major, major problems, because you're being inappropriate. You know, if you've got 40-year-old children, you know, they don't actually want to be mothered in quite the way they were when they were 5 and 6. Do you see what I mean? So those energies affect our internal world and how we are in the world. And it's not about a negative energy, it's just they're positive energies, but they're in the wrong place. And often, for me, that's what a negative energy is. It's an energy that's in the wrong place. Because in the universe, there is a place for everything, and everything has its place. There's no such thing in my book as a negative. There's just an energy that's in the wrong place. So, thank you for listening. Right.